You started to dress differently, honor your boundaries, and you changed your hair. And they said, you're doing too much. You choose peace. You stop over explaining. Now, you're called rude. You hold them accountable. And now somehow, they made it all about them. Today on Unpacking Me, we're naming something a lot of us carry but rarely talk about. The shame that comes when you start to become you. Today, we are talking about shaming me into being you. I am your host, Nikki Cameron.
And I am Murnell St. Jean.
This episode is for anyone who has been emotionally manipulated, guilted, or labeled ungrateful just for growing, for saying no, for not being who someone else needed you to be in order for them to feel comfortable. The written rules of belonging? Good kids don't question things. Loyal daughters and sons and partners, they keep peace. Respectful people stay in their roles, even when they're miserable.
Yep.
You're taught that your truth equals betrayal. What if the version of you they miss never allowed you to fully exist?
Say that again.
What if the version of you they miss never allowed you to fully exist?
Wow. That's powerful.
Yeah, because there's a lot of shaming going on. The moment that someone decides to live their lives in a healthier way or a different way, it tends to contradict what is often expected of them. So you're in a community or a family where we all have our own bodies, right? But we function under the one identity.
One identity.
So you hear parents say something like, when you leave this house, they see me. What you do is it affects me. So therefore, you don't have an identity. Your identity is mine. And my identity is only yours when I want it to belong to you.
Oh,
selectively.
Yeah, selective.
So when I do things and you call me out,
How dare you?
how dare you? Because you're rude.
Yeah.
You don't get to hold me accountable.
No.
I get to own your identity. But I am the parent. You don't get to own my identity.
Yep.
So Murnell, talk to me about this use of shame to shape and control.
Am I not the perfect person to talk to? This is literally the topic of my life. And shame is used so much to control. There's different versions of it too. There's this subtle shame where they will say things like, you used to be so sweet. And I've heard, you used to be such a good girl. Or you've changed. And I've heard, you're selfish. Or so now you think you're better than everybody else.
Or now you
Oh,
think
now
you're
you think
grown.
you're grown. I've heard, you're not more grown than me. And I'm like, okay.
And I just want to name that shame means I am bad.
I am bad. Mm-hmm.
We need to name
We have to.
They're healthy doses of shame, but shame means that the situation or the behavior that I displayed is bad, not me, my character. But we often tend to internalize. So I think we needed to name that. Shame means I am bad. So therefore, that control is being of shaming is used to tell you you are bad if you don't fit in. You're bad if you don't fall in line.
Right. You're bad if you don't do what I say, or you're bad if you're not living life the way I want you to live life. And so, and I'm glad you named shame, because we have to be able to name it to be able to understand how it's used on us. And then there's this overt shame where it's just straight up in your face. You're being disrespectful, or you're just doing this for attention, or you're doing too much, or you're selfish. I've or you're the child and I'm the parent. And so it's this blatantly in your face. I am clearly doing, saying, and doing these things to keep you in line, because I know that if I were to use this emotion against you, you will do as I say and be the person, the version of yourself that I want you to be, because that version makes me comfortable.
Yes.
And when you step out of line of that version, I become uncomfortable.
Right.
And therefore, it is my job to bring you back in line so that I can be comfortable.
Absolutely.
That's it. That's what the shame is. That's how they use shame to control. Yeah. And so sometimes the people who raise you are the most uncomfortable with your healing.
Big facts.
I giggle when they say that, because it's the truth, especially if you come from a shame culture or a shame using family. And I want to repeat it, because sometimes the people who raise you are the most uncomfortable with your healing. It just had to be named. And so, what are some real life examples, or some examples of when shame is disguised, or rejection is disguised as love?
Well, it starts with allowing yourself to have the understanding that as human beings, we tend to either idealize each other, idolize each other, or we villainize each other. I'm going to say that again. As humans, we tend to idealize each other. This person is the ideal version of this, that. Idolize each other, where it becomes about worshiping, or we villainize each other.
Yes.
And some of us, especially adult children, we were raised to idolize our parents.
Yes. And idealize in some times.
Right. Absolutely. And sometimes it goes both ways. Our parents idolize us. So whenever we are the good girl or the good boy, and we are overachievers and we're successful, or we're following along and being the obedient follower, we get idolized by the family.
Yeah.
So I wanted to use that as an example of one way. And the moment we decide, or you decide, that you want to live your life authentically,
Oh, wow.
and not prioritize who they want you to be versus who you know internally in your deepest depths of your soul that you want to be, then you get villainized. You become the villain.
Yeah.
So you may start setting boundaries for yourself, and then you start to get accused of being cold.
Oh, yeah.
And a boundary might look like, my mom calls me every day. This is just an example. Some people do not believe that they get to say, today I just can't answer the phone. I don't have the capacity. I just want to be. So it can look like, I decide that I'm not going to answer the phone every time I'm at work unless it's lunchtime. And you communicate that to your family members. You set the tone of, hey guys, if it's not an emergency, please don't call me while I'm at work, because I could lose my job. So you promise yourself you're going to follow through, and not, I will check in at lunchtime, but outside of that, if I see you calling, I'm going to assume it's an emergency. And they call you. Your mother calls you. She'll call you for stuff like, hey, can you order this on Amazon? Or, hey, can you call so and so?
Yep.
This is literally what I get
happens.
feedback from individuals.
Happens.
And when you say to them, I asked you before to call me during lunch, and it's 10 o'clock and you're calling me about Amazon mom, can you understand that? Well, why do you have to be so cold? You can't understand that I'm just not good with the computer, but they're good with going on
They're
Instagram.
good with everything else.
They're good with Facebook.
They're good on the
right?
phone.
So you get accused of being cold because you can't be manipulated into what they want you to be or who they want you to be.
I've had this example that I want to use real quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an open book about this because
Mm-hmm.
this is one of those things in my life that I have been working really hard to establish healthy boundaries because I grew up in a shame household
Mm-hmm.
where shame was used oftentimes to
control.
control and manipulate.
Mm-hmm.
And we all were supposed to have one identity,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the identity of my mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even the other day, me and my sister were having a conversation. My sister said to me, I realize a lot of the shame that I carry is not mine, but my mom's.
Yeah.
Because she gave it to us. Because we had to be in line. We had to do things a specific type of way.
Mm-hmm.
And using the example of work, my mother once said to me, why do you work so much? She just recently retired, so she has a lot of time on her hand.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was calling, and I'm with clients.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't pick up my phone. And so when I finally was able to call her back, I got a stern talking to about working too much
Mm-hmm.
and not being available
For
enough
her when she
for
needs
her.
you. Mm-hmm.
I'm like, Mom, you don't pay my bills. You
Well.
don't pay my bills.
Mm-hmm.
She was, well, you shouldn't be working too much. You work too much. I don't like it. And I'm
Right.
like, okay.
Yeah, that's a great example, right? It's not that I'm all for family. I value family. I love being around my family, right? But being a family member does not mean that you overlook abuse.
Yes.
Being a family member does not mean that you have to join in the normalization of unhealthy behaviors and unhealthy ways of control. And people pleasing, that is one thing that a lot of individuals struggle with, thinking that I have to say yes so that I won't be abandoned.
Yep.
I have to say yes so that I won't be rejected. Because when many individuals say no, they start to get labeled as being difficult. Why do you have to be so difficult all the time? Why do you have to be so different? You are causing problems in the family.
Yeah.
So many people have a problem with saying no.
Yeah.
They genuinely are. I mean, people have anxiety, severe anxiety, and overwhelmed just at the thought of holding family members or friends, right? Because this isn't only about family members.
Right.
Many individuals have a hard time standing in their rights and being autonomous in saying no.
Yeah.
Many individuals are having to learn how to say no. And so some might wonder, well, why is it so difficult? I say no and I don't have a problem with it. Well, maybe you, for some reason, the environments you were in fostered your right to say no, and maybe it didn't, but you made a decision that despite the discomfort, you were going to honor your no. There is typically a physiological, right? I like to say a neurobiological portion to this in terms of your nervous system.
Yeah.
Where when you've been shamed over and over and over again, the thought of saying no triggers that shame and that this stress response, and the shame, your brain reads it as a threat.
It steals your voice.
Yes, it shuts you down.
Yeah.
People will feel lumps in their throat and feel like they're going to die, literally.
Yes.
And so it's not fair to ever generalize things or speak in specifics as if this can go across the board. Well, I say no, so why can't someone say no? Or I set boundaries with my family, so why can't they? The situation differs from person to person, and it is not ever fair or reasonable to impose our beliefs or experiences onto other people.
Exactly.
And this is why when I speak, I like to say this is our unique experiences, because saying no for one might be easy, saying no for another might result in an anxiety attack, saying no for another might trigger shame. Regardless of what it does for you, you are entitled to have your no. You are entitled to have your boundaries. And remember that when they can't control you, they will try to shame you.
Yeah.
Many individuals, when they cannot control you, they will try to shame you and even see the boundaries you try to set as an attack on their character. And you get to give yourself permission to work through the difficulty little by little of understanding that because you're doing this new different thing, it is going to feel uncomfortable, and not take ownership of another human being's emotions.
That's good. And another thing, and I think we kind of spoke on it a little bit, but just to kind of really make sure that we understand this idea of shame and control, one thing that shame does when it's consistent in our lives, in our environment, is that it creates an identity crisis.
Absolutely.
It forces you to either lose your identity, create an identity that is against yourself, and that's a big one. And sometimes, or give you an identity that doesn't belong to you. It does create an identity crisis, and you lose your voice.
Absolutely.
It's so you find it difficult to speak, and you start wondering things like, am I the problem? It's one of my favorite. I always ask that question. Am I the problem? Because sometimes with shame, you begin to take on their emotions, and you're beginning to and the shame is, I'm what's wrong, I'm the wrong thing. And so that idea of asking and wondering, am I the problem? That's normal. Or you tend to second guess your emotion or your behavior, especially when it's a behavior where you're defending yourself or you're speaking up. You find yourself going, maybe I'm being dramatic.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if I could piggyback off
Yeah,
of
go
something
ahead.
you said about being the problem. Um, there's a difference between there are healthy doses of asking,
Yes.
am I the problem? Right? They're healthy doses of assessing whether the problem rests with you, right? Or lies with you.
Right.
There's a difference between saying, am I the problem versus is my behavior the problem? Do you hear the difference?
There's a big difference.
Am I flawed? Am I the issue? Or is my behavior flawed? My behavior the issue? Because one is really assessing your character.
Yes.
The other one is assessing the situation, the behavior. And we've been so trained to view ourselves as being the problem sometimes as human beings that's why we start to internalize the issues and see the issues as a character flaw. So if you're asking, is my behavior the problem? Is my approach the problem? It allows you to hopefully take a look at the situation around the conflict and not question, am I, is my existence, is my being, am I the issue? Because then it leads to toxic shame. There are healthy doses of shame,
Of
because
course.
it helps us to honor people's boundaries and respect. But when you start to, am I the problem? You've already started to internalize the situation, taking responsibility for the other person's emotion, and that can be very harmful and toxic.
Very, very much
because what it starts to do is cause you then to see your whole identity, your whole being
as a problem,
as the problem versus the situation or the behaviors.
That's good. Because and another part of it is that when we don't have our own identity and we're forced to take on an identity that betrays us, we oftentimes end up questioning our boundaries.
Absolutely.
Where we would set the boundary, but because we get an answer to the boundary or a response that oftentimes cause us to go into a flight or fight or freeze mode, we question it. Is this the right boundary? Did I do the right thing?
Yeah.
Which oftentimes causes us to shrink, and we go small to prove that we're not mean, we're not bad, we're not different. And so that is a thing that takes place for us.
We need to remember that it is not their responsibility to reinforce your boundaries. It is not other people's responsibility to reinforce your boundaries. It is your responsibility to reinforce them. Others may not want to respect them or honor them, but it doesn't mean you have to abandon them.
One thing I want to say about boundaries is that boundaries are there to protect you, not to hurt another person. However, we cannot help how other people respond to our boundaries.
You can't.
And their response might be hurt. That's okay. Because our boundaries are not there to intentionally hurt. They're there to make sure that we're protected.
It's not a weapon.
It's
Right.
not a weapon. And I just wanted to name that. And I wanted to say, what's the cost of shrinking to keep someone else comfortable? What's the cost of shrinking to keep somebody else comfortable? I think we need to think about that, especially when we grow up in a shame culture or have been in a household where shame is used against us. Because it forces us not to grow. And the one thing I want to say about growth is that growth isn't always graceful.
No.
And that's okay. It's not always graceful, but that's okay. And validation doesn't always come from the people you love. A lot of the time, when we're dealing with shame, we seek validation from the same people who instilled the shame within us. And that keeps us in a shame cycle. And so understanding that validation doesn't always come from the people you love is very important.
Absolutely.
Because it can set you free.
Right.
It gives you permission to seek validation from yourself.
Yes. Say that again one more time.
It gives you permission to seek validation from yourself. It gives you permission to say no without explaining. It also gives permission to grow.
Yes.
But there's something important about growth. Growth comes with guilt.
Say that one more time.
Growth comes with guilt because guilt is there to put you back in place. And guilt is I did something bad.
Right.
Where shame is I am someone bad. Guilt is I did something bad. So when we start to grow and find our voice and begin to come out of that shame experience, one thing we have to also do is normalize guilt.
Yeah.
Surrounding that.
Yeah. Because you're doing something new and different from what you've always done, and guilt's gonna show up.
Yes.
To say, what the hell
What
are
you
doing?
Guilt will show up. Understanding that also gives you permission to take up space. Because now that we understand that guilt will show up, to normalize the guilt, now we have permission to take up space. And rewire the definition of respect to include self-respect.
Ouch.
That is big. Because a lot of the time, we would choose respect of others over respect of self. Wow. And that's a betrayal to ourselves.
Right.
Especially if we grew up in an environment or in a culture or surrounded by shame.
Wow. You know, the thought just emerged for me that if you think about it, many households, many relationships, we were taught to prioritize respecting others.
Yes.
Over self.
Yes.
There wasn't if you think about it, many a times, the only time we heard respect yourself was when something was done that went against the grain. When something was done that didn't fall in line with what was expected from you by the people who are trying to control you.
Right.
But it was never, hey, this is what self-respect needs to look like. It means you get to be autonomous in your decisions. It means that you get to say no. It means that you can understand that you don't have to take responsibility for how I feel. Never that.
No.
So when there's this, and I'm glad that you are extending the invitation to us, everyone, to redefine what self-respect or respect means, because self-respect, I think the unspoken part of it is having people, because of the environment they were in, thinking that self-respect means I prioritize your needs and your comfort over my autonomy, my right to say no and be who I am authentically.
Right.
So thank you for highlighting that.
Definitely. Thank you for bringing that out. And I want to remind us you can be kind, loving, and soft and still say, that's not who I am anymore. It doesn't take away from you. You can still be loving, you can still be kind, you can still be soft, and you can still say, that's not who I am anymore. You can still say no. You can still say, I don't want to. None of those things take away from the fact that you're a kind, loving, and soft individual.
Mm-hmm. And that reminder has me now questioning or wanting to share some prompts. When have I felt punished for being myself? When have you felt punished for being yourself? Additionally, what am I still afraid to say out loud because someone might be uncomfortable? What are you still afraid to say out loudly because someone might be uncomfortable? I really want you to reflect on that. When was the first time you felt you were punished for being yourself? And what messages or commitments did that cause you to make? Maybe you remember, or maybe you don't. So if you were to travel back in time between ages 0 to 16, when was the first time you felt you were being punished for being yourself? And what did you start to believe as a result of that? And now, what are you still afraid to say out loudly just because someone else might be uncomfortable? It's important for you to check in on that and know what's keeping you stuck and held back. Sometimes we are afraid to say things out loudly because we don't want to feel uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't want to say what is true and what is reality based because we don't want to feel the discomfort that goes along with facing the reality of things. So we remain in denial. And like one of my clients say, denial is sexy. Denial is sexy, but it's costly. It keeps you in that place of not having to face the truth, but what is it costing you?
Yeah.
So join me in placing your hand over your chest, just to make space for the seat of your identity. And take a deep breath in and hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale. And say with me, I'm not a disappointment.
I'm not a disappointment.
I'm just no longer disappearing.
I'm just no longer disappearing.
So, with your hand over your chest, speak into your identity, into your soul, into your core of being. And take another deep breath in, hold it, and exhale slowly. And say with me, I'm not a disappointment.
I'm not a disappointment.
I'm just no longer disappearing.
I'm just no longer disappearing. I want to remind us, all of us who have grown up in a culture of guilt or have experienced shame or have experienced it, that you're not a bad person for growing. You're not ungrateful for choosing peace, and you're not selfish for healing. You were never meant to be someone else's mirror. You're meant to be your whole self. And if they can only love you when you're performing, that's not love. That's control. Ooh. I want us to remember that. We are meant to be our whole self. And if they're only loving you when you're performing, that is not love. That is control. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was one of my favorite because we deal with this. This is something that I grew up with, still working on and growing through. And so it's one of my favorite topics. I would like to invite us to share this episode with somebody who we think needs to hear it. Leave us a comment. Check us out on daretoemerge.com. Check us out on Instagram. And if you're on our website, go ahead and check the group section if you're in the Fort Lauderdale, Oakland Park area, where we have the friendship space.
Yes, which will be closing shortly.
Oh, hurry up. It's closing. So you guys can get in there and enjoy making friends and finding others who are similar, like-minded, learning, growing. Yes. Next week on Unpacking Me, we're diving into something many of us struggle with, but don't say out loud. I feel like that's all of our episodes, but I do want to share the title of next week's episode is You Are Not.
No, your no.
Your no. Oh, your no is not a character flaw. Ooh, your no is not a character
and
flaw.
it fits right into what we talked about
It
today.
does. I love it. I can't wait to be a part of this episode. Until next time, be kind to yourself.
Because you deserve it.